Okay. Show me.
Hi there guys, welcome back to the Dutch channel. Thank you very much for tuning in and welcome to my workbench here. I am working on the ET5 ultra light 5-inch quadcopter. So I've got the all-in-one ESC/flight controller installed already. Motors are on the frame. The next thing I want to install is our VTX, and that VTX is from BetaFPV. It's in this box. It is the, does the box say, yeah, the box says it's an M02, bit of a nondescript name. But okay, so in this video I'm gonna review this VTX, see if it's easy to install, to use, and if it, well, if it VTXs, well, if you will. So let's first see what's in this box. And here is everything that was in that box. So this is the VTX itself, and it's, well, slightly bigger than a fingernail, as you can tell. It is tiny, and the maximum output of this VTX, the M02, is 350 milliwatts, which is reasonable for a VTX of this size, I think. And we've got this mounting bracket, which makes it easy to mount it in a whoop style of board configuration, or stack, if you will. So this mounting pattern is the same as, well, whoop style boards. We got a wire harness, and what do you need a harness for? You would expect to be soldering to these tabs, and you don't need to use this wire harness, or at least not the plug, but the VTX does have a connector at its bottom. More on that in a second. I think that's a pro and a con at the same time, this connector over here. Okay, more on that in a second. And we get a nice, actually, antenna, right? Most times with a VTX you get, well, maybe a whip antenna, but we actually get a circular polarized antenna. And these are actually the same antenna as PDB makes or sells. iFlight also sells these, and more. I think there are a couple of other brands that use the exact same antenna. I actually have quite a couple of these, and they work. I'm not saying that they are the best antenna ever, but they work, and they are crash resistant as well, not unimportantly. And yeah, UFL connector, so that's not super duper crash resistant. You will have to secure this antenna down to your frame or canopy. Be aware. And you get some mounting accessories, a couple of screws and some anti-vibration gummies. I would have liked plastic standoffs, but this will work just fine. Okay, so that's what you get. How do you install this? Well, you actually have a couple of options. You can obviously solder this VTX to this mounting board. And there's no extra electronics on this board. It's simply a mounting platform, and it routes your soldering points to the edge of this board. That's all this board does. For instance, Mamba/Diatone has these kinds of boards that do add electronics. Ripple filters, for instance. Capacitors, basically. So, okay, and the VTX itself has these solder tabs. I hope you'll be able to see it with the VTX being this small. Yeah, so these solder pads you can solder up to this mounting board, but you can obviously also solder wires to it directly. So those are two ways to install the VTX, but you've got a third one with this plug. So the VTX has this white plug at the bottom, or, well, bottom. Let's call it the bottom. And you go ahead and plug this thing in, and then obviously you solder up these wires to your flight controller. Makes sense, right? So this plug, this white plug over here on the VTX, I think there are two sides to it. First of all, it does make installation and working on your quadcopter a lot easier. Say maybe you've got some kind of damage on your quadcopter and you want to remove the VTX to work on your flight controller, for instance, resolder a wire, what have you. It's then easy to remove your VTX because it's plugged plugged in rather than soldered in, right? So if you were to solder your wires to these headers, which is possible, it's then slightly less easy to, well, get to the other components of your quadcopter. Makes sense, I hope, and obviously it's easy to install this plug. It doesn't get much easier than that. However, this plug also makes the VTX a lot thicker. In fact, it makes it approximately twice as thick. Without the plug, the VTX would have been 3 millimeters, more or less. I haven't measured it, but I guess it's approximately 3 millimeters without the plug and 6 millimeters with the plug. So yeah, with that, this VTX takes up vertically more space. And it's not easy to get rid of this plug, really. No. So that's something you need to consider if you were to consider this VTX. Do you have actually space in your quadcopter vertically? I do in this quadcopter. It's a 5-inch quadcopter and the canopy does have quite a lot of space. But if you are working within a budget in terms of space, that might be something to consider. And okay, so other than that, it has a UFL connector over here and a button to cycle through bands and channels and power, I guess, but obviously we'll be using smart audio to set it up. And then by the magic of YouTube, my VTX is installed in the quadcopter, as you can tell here. So how did I go about soldering up the VTX into this mounting board? Well, I used a couple of these alligator clips to hold it in place for a second. And then I just soldered up the first tabs, or the first, well, connector pairs, if you will. And that's enough to, well, then secure it in place. And that's pretty simple. And you see this kind of setup in all kinds of electronics. So nothing special there. However, while installing it, I thought, well, maybe I should explain all the connector tabs a little bit more, because especially if you're new to this, they might throw you a curveball. Also notice that I have hooked up an antenna just to make sure that I don't accidentally power up my VTX without an antenna on it, because that can damage your VTX, burn it up. So always be sure to hook up an antenna while you're, well, when you're installing it. Okay, so all the connector pads, and I'll throw up a diagram of the VTX so you can more clearly see things. On our left are the main pads, if you will. And it starts at the top with the power, so 5 volt and ground. Obviously you need that to operate this VTX, otherwise it won't do anything. So you need to feed it 5 volts and ground. Then we've got 2 pads, which again might throw you a curveball. You've got VTX and cam. What? And this is a VTX already, right? And it has a VTX pad. Also, it has a cam pad over here and it has a cam pad over here on the right side of the VTX. Or yeah, so what is that about? Well, basically you can use these boards as a follow through for your camera. And it's not the only VTX that does this, but basically you can hook up your camera to the right over here, power, ground and camera. 5 volt ground and camera, and that frees you from having to hook up your camera to the flight controller itself. So that would have the camera's image, the image your camera captures, feed into your VTX. And that might make sense, however, that way you wouldn't have an OSD, right? Because your flight controller manages your OSD, provides your OSD. So on the left side you've got that VTX and cam. Now that cam will be connected to your flight controller's cam pad, and the VTX pad will connect to the VTX or the video out on your flight controller. It is a bit of a mind stretch if you are completely new to it, but again, the cam pad over here will be connected to your video in on your flight controller. That way your flight controller will receive the camera's image, then it'll process it, add your OSD, and then your flight controller has a video out, right? Which is the video feed with OSD, and that will be connected to your VTX pad over here. And I think they could have maybe labeled it a little clearer, but well, now that you've seen this video, you can know how to hook it up. Then we've got two other pads over here. We've got a smart audio pad, which makes sense. You hook it up to a transmit pad on your flight controller, so you can use smart audio. Then we've got an SW switch pad, and the documentation isn't clear on that. Now, this isn't the only VTX that has a switch pad like this. In most cases, that's a way to expose this switch over here, this button, if you will. Maybe you can't reach this button in some installations. So by exposing this SW, the switch, the button functionality to a soldering pad, you can move that pad. And I have asked BetaFPV about the functionality of this SW pad. And well, I only asked them today, so I haven't gotten an answer. But I think you won't really need it, especially if you use smart audio. If you use smart audio, you don't need this button at all anyway. So that's basically the physical installation, right? You can see the wires over here coming off of that connector at the bottom of our VTX. And that's it. I will be hooking up my camera straight to the flight controller over here. But again, I could have used these pads over here just the same. Would have made no difference at all, basically. And that's it. So let's now see if it actually works. Let's go and fly this sucker. Here we go. And there you have it, guys. Obviously, I'm glad that this worked out. This is my first test flight with the ET5, in case you follow my channel. And flies pretty well. There's a little bit of tuning left to do, but this video is about the VTX, right? The M02 VTX. As you can tell from this footage, this looks pretty nice. Very clean FPV feed. Yes, obviously the DJI digital system is better. It's more detailed and such. But still, this comes pretty close. This is a nice and clean video feed. Also courtesy of the Runcam Phoenix version 2, of course. That makes the image look nice. I should state that I'm not doing, obviously not doing any kind of range checking here. That would mostly be testing my goggle, the range of my goggle. So there's no use to that. Also, I'm simply flying it at 200 milliwatts, as you can see from the top left corner. I never really fly my VTXs at their peak level. Just like you wouldn't run your car on full throttle all the time, right? Okay, what more can I tell you about this? Well, yeah, basically the cleaner your video feed is, as you can see here, the video feed is very clean. This also makes it easier for your receiver to pick up on the signal, to keep track of the sync pulse, if you will. Again, the cleaner your video feed is, this will actually help your range and penetration. So there is that. Yeah, again, this works out. This VTX looks to deliver on its promises. It together with a good setup, of course, you can get a nice and clean video feed from this VTX. So that's nice. Very nice, actually. So to conclude this video, I'll show you what my BetaFlight setup looks like for this VTX. Alright, lucky for all of us, it's pretty simple. If you want to use smart audio with this VTX, and you probably will, you'll need to select the UART that you hooked up to the VTX for your smart audio, and in my case that's UART2, as you can tell here, and you will have to select TBS smart audio over there, and that's all you need to do in that screen, the port screen. Then we move to the video transmitter screen or tab. That should look like this. more or less. Let me see. Yeah, I've got my band and channel selected, Boscam E and channel 3 and power 200, and you obviously can select any of the VTX channels, but you will have to populate this screen, the channels, the frequencies and the power levels at the bottom left. And those are the things you need to enter into the system. And I've actually compiled a script for you. In the comment section of this video there will be a script, this script you see here. The highlighted part here, the blue highlighted part here, you'll have to copy paste into your CLI tab in BetaFlight. So paste that into your CLI and hit enter. And after that your video transmitter tab will look like this. So that's everything you need to do to set up this VTX and have it working. This is the setup I use, and as you could see it works. So that's nice. And that's it guys, I hope this video helped you out. Also gave you some information about the performance of this VTX. Well, and when I say this VTX you can't see the VTX anymore because it's now in this quadcopter. More on this ET5 project in a future video. Quite an interesting build I must say. And a lot of fun to fly as well. So again, more on this project in an upcoming video. And a funny side note, I started this video by telling you that I suspected that this M02 VTX would end up in future BetaFPV quadcopters. It has actually already ended up in their 6S version of the X-Night, released today. So that was a funny side note. Anyway, if you are left with questions, hit me up a comment down below. Catch you on the next video. Bye bye.